Who saw Old Yeller?
When a neighbor discovered Tommy Kirk's lifeless body, his close friend Peter Peterson took to the public to share the devastating news. But that wasn't the most heartbreaking part. In his announcement, Peterson revealed a tragic, deeply personal detail about the actor's life. Tommy Kirk had once been a child star whose success brought Disney massive profits, but then, almost overnight, he vanished from Hollywood. What led to his sudden disappearance, and why did he turn his back on the entertainment industry? As a young boy, Tommy Kirk charmed audiences and became a beloved figure in some of Disney's most iconic films. But his abrupt departure from the studio left fans in shock and confusion. Behind the scenes, Kirk harbored a secret, one so controversial at the time that when Disney uncovered it, they cut ties with him completely. Born on December 10, 1941 in Louisville, Kentucky, Tommy Kirk came from humble beginnings. He was one of 4 brothers in a family that struggled to make ends meet. His parents, desperate for better job prospects, packed up and relocated west to California. That decision would unknowingly set the stage for their son's remarkable journey. Kirk's older brother Joe was the one bitten by the acting bug, and he convinced young Tommy to join him at an audition at the Pasadena Playhouse. Joe unfortunately didn't land the role he had hoped for, but fate had other plans. To everyone's surprise, it was Tommy who was chosen. That single, unexpected moment would change the course of his life forever. Kirk's role at the Pasadena Playhouse was small, a few lines and no paycheck to speak of. But one night, a talent agent in the audience saw something special in him. The agent, representing the Gertz agency, wasted no time in signing Kirk. Suddenly, Kirk found himself leaving the stage behind and stepping into the world of television, where the opportunities and the money were far more promising. Kirk's first breakaway from live theater came with a role in an episode of TV Reader's Digest titled The Last of the Old-Time Shooting Sheriffs. While his older brother Joe eventually gave up acting to become a dentist, Tommy was charting a path toward stardom. His talent didn't go unnoticed for long. Disney soon had their eye on him, and it wasn't long before they came knocking. At the time, the Mickey Mouse Club was still a relatively new phenomenon, but it had quickly captured the hearts of young audiences. When Disney decided to adapt the popular Hardy Boys books into a series, they cast Kirk as Joe Hardy. The show was an instant success, and Kirk's performance made him a fan favorite. With his charm and budding talent, Kirk was quickly becoming a Disney golden boy, and the studio had big plans for their rising star. What set Tommy Kirk apart from other child actors was his rare ability to cry on command, a skill Disney wasted no time in capitalizing on. They cast him in Old Yeller, a heart-wrenching film that required Kirk to deliver one of the most emotionally devastating scenes in cinematic history. By the movie's end, Kirk's character is forced to shoot his beloved dog Yeller after the animal contracts rabies. The gut-wrenching moment was powerful enough on its own, but it was Kirk's raw emotional performance that solidified its place in pop culture forever. At the time, no one could have guessed that this scene would become such an iconic cultural touchstone. Kirk's devastating farewell to Yeller is so unforgettable that many adults still rank watching it as one of the most painful experiences of their childhoods. It's even been referenced in other works. Bill Murray's character in Stripes mentions the trauma, and an episode of Friends has the famously detached group of New Yorkers watching the scene and recoiling in horror. Whether it was the drama or the heartbreak, Old Yeller catapulted Kirk to a new level of stardom. The film became a massive success, ranking as the 5th highest-grossing movie of 1957, a feat that thrilled Disney. Kirk once recalled a moment at a Beverly Hills hotel when he ran into Walt Disney himself, who no doubt saw his young star as a key player in the studio's future. Kirk couldn't hide his pride when Walt Disney himself referred to him as his good luck piece in front of others. But just when things seemed to be going perfectly, Kirk found himself on shaky ground. Years later, he admitted that during his time at Walt Disney Studios, he went through a particularly rough patch. The reason? His appearance. Kirk had grown too thin and frail-looking for Disney's typical roles. While Disney never explicitly said it, it was clear that his look no longer aligned with their vision for their stars. Just when it seemed like Kirk might be left behind, a new opportunity emerged, one that perfectly suited his appearance. In 1960, Disney began production on a major feature film, Swiss Family Robinson. The movie, about a shipwrecked family surviving on a tropical island, needed someone who looked lean and rugged, and Kirk fit the bill. The production took the cast and crew all the way to the unspoiled shores of Tobago, far from the comforts of home. For Kirk, the distance was overwhelming. He later confessed that while filming Swiss Family Robinson, he felt deeply homesick and even considered quitting to return to California. But surprisingly, it wasn't his family he missed. Kirk wasn't longing for home-cooked meals or family gatherings. He was pining for California's vibrant nightlife. Despite his homesickness, Kirk saw the production through to the end. His detachment from his own family raised eyebrows, but the answer seemed simple. Hollywood had become his family. Over the years, Kirk had portrayed Fred MacMurray's son so many times that their bond felt real. By 1962, the two were back on screen together in Bon Voyage, and Kirk began to see MacMurray as the father figure he never fully had at home. Unfortunately for Tommy Kirk, Fred MacMurray had no interest in stepping into the role of a surrogate parent off-screen. When Kirk began acting out, MacMurray's patience ran out. Instead of offering guidance or support, the famously even-tempered star of My Three Sons delivered what Kirk later described as the harshest dressing down of his life. It was anything but a heartwarming father-son chat. MacMurray made it clear he wasn't there to coddle anyone. If Kirk hoped for a softer touch from his on-screen mother, he was sorely disappointed. In Bon Voyage, Jane Wyman played Kirk's mom, but off-camera, she was far from maternal. Kirk recalled that Wyman was downright mean to him throughout the production. He speculated that her attitude stemmed from resentment. Perhaps the Oscar-winning actress wasn't thrilled about being relegated to playing a teenager's mother in a Disney movie. But Kirk believed there was a much deeper, more personal reason behind Wyman's cold treatment. By the time he was filming Bon Voyage, Kirk had come to terms with his sexuality. He suspected Wyman had figured it out too, and he believed that her hostility toward him was rooted in this realization. For Kirk, this made an already challenging situation even harder to bear. At the time, Kirk's career hinged on staying in Disney's good graces. Any misstep could spell disaster. In 1962, the studio sent Kirk to Europe to film Escapade in Florence, pairing him with Annette Funicello. Soon after, rumors started swirling in the press that the two young stars were romantically involved. Of course, this couldn't have been further from the truth, but the gossip played perfectly into Disney's wholesome image. If anything, it likely pleased the studio to no end. For Tommy Kirk, keeping his secret hidden was crucial. He was walking on thin ice, and one wrong step could shatter everything. Despite this precarious situation, Disney still had big plans for him. They decided to capitalize on the success of Old Yeller by producing a sequel, Savage Sam. With Kirk back alongside his on-screen brother, Kevin Corcoran, Disney hoped lightning would strike twice. But from the very beginning, something felt off. Even before production began, a tragic incident cast a dark shadow over the project. The screenplay for Savage Sam was based on a book by Fred Gibson, who drew inspiration from his own beloved dog. But just before the movie's release, tragedy struck Gibson's family. His son found the dog's lifeless body. It had been brutally beaten to death. The horror didn't end there. Overcome with grief, Gibson's son tragically ended his own life shortly afterward. With this devastating backdrop, Kirk was tasked with bringing Savage Sam to life, but the magic of Old Yeller was impossible to replicate. Audiences and critics alike felt the sequel lacked the heart and emotional punch of the original. One critic even described it as a dogged, listless effort. Savage Sam wasn't just a disappointment, it was proof that Kirk couldn't always save a film. For Disney, this marked strike one. Unfortunately, Kirk's next project would lead to an even bigger disaster. He began filming The Misadventures of Merlin Jones, once again starring alongside Annette Funicello. But behind the scenes, trouble was brewing, and this time it would push Kirk even closer to the brink. Tommy Kirk wasn't just dealing with on-screen misadventures, he found himself in serious trouble off camera too. Kirk had been dating a boy, and their relationship became a public issue after they were seen showing affection at a local swimming pool. When the boy's mother found out, she wasted no time contacting Disney. The fallout was immediate, and Kirk was in hot water. The rumor mill exploded with whispers about Kirk's relationship, and the atmosphere at the studio quickly changed. He later admitted that many people at Disney suddenly became cold and distant toward him. It wasn't long before the consequences of his actions caught up to him. The moment that stopped him dead in his tracks came when Walt Disney himself made the call to terminate Kirk's contract. But it wasn't just the incident at the pool that sealed Kirk's fate. Years later, Kirk confessed that his real strike three was his escalating drug use during that time. He admitted to being all the time and said it was this, combined with the controversy, that marked the end of his career at Disney. Reflecting on this moment, Kirk called it the end of my fairy tale. The studio's decision to cut ties wasn't shocking, but what happened next must have blindsided everyone involved. The Misadventures of Merlin Jones became a massive box office hit, proving that even without Disney's support, Kirk still had the power to draw audiences. Critics didn't mince words when reviewing The Misadventures of Merlin Jones. They saw it for what it was, a cobbled-together TV show masquerading as a feature film. But audiences didn't care. They loved Tommy Kirk, and they loved the movie. Walt Disney, who famously disliked sequels, couldn't ignore the box office success. Money talked, and soon enough, Disney greenlit a sequel. There was just one glaring issue. Kirk was already fired. Despite Disney's reluctance to accept Kirk for who he was, there was no denying his talent. Kirk had a knack for turning modestly budgeted films into blockbuster hits, and The Monkey's Uncle, the sequel to Merlin Jones, was no exception. The film raked in big money, proving once again that Kirk had star power. But even that success wasn't enough to change Disney's stance. No amount of box office revenue could persuade the studio to welcome him back. By this point, Disney didn't make any public declarations about Kirk's firing, but the truth was out. Kirk was no longer part of the Magic Kingdom. Without Disney, he had to carve a new path. Enter American International Pictures, where he reunited with his old co-star Annette Funicello. The studio was gearing up for a teen comedy called Pajama Party, and Kirk eagerly jumped on board. What Kirk didn't know was that this lighthearted flick would catapult him into an entirely new genre: beach party films. At the time, America was obsessed with sunny escapades and bikini-clad adventures, and Kirk quickly became a staple of these wildly popular movies. Tommy Kirk's career was still going strong with a string of quirky, crowd-pleasing beach party films. Titles like The Ghost in the Invisible Bikini, It's a Bikini World, and Catalina Caper kept audiences flocking to theaters, and Kirk was once again proving himself as a reliable moneymaker for studios. All he needed to do was stay out of trouble. But apparently, that was easier said than done. In 1964, Kirk attended a Christmas party that would change everything. For reasons unclear, the police arrived and discovered that Kirk was in possession of marijuana. That alone was bad enough, but things quickly spiraled further. When officers searched his car, they also found sedatives. For someone who had built his career as the wholesome, all-American boy, this was a devastating blow. Kirk faced serious consequences. Although the district attorney eventually dropped the possession charges, there was still the issue of the sedatives. Fortunately, Kirk's lawyer provided proof that the pills were legally prescribed by his doctor. While this was a small victory, the damage had already been done. The fallout was swift and brutal. Kirk's squeaky clean image was shattered, and Hollywood turned its back on him almost overnight. Before the scandal, Kirk had 3 films lined up and ready to shoot. But after the Christmas party incident, he was replaced in all of them. His once bright career was now hanging by a thread. Kirk's fall from grace continued with roles in films like Wild Bikini, Beach Ball, and the more promising The Sons of Katie Elder. The latter was the real blow. This film could have been his ticket out of the beach party circuit and into something more serious. Starring John Wayne, The Sons of Katie Elder was a potential career relaunch for Kirk. But the universe had other plans. Desperate for money, Kirk took whatever work he could get. His manager, indifferent to the quality of the projects, was just focused on the paycheck. So, Kirk found himself in a series of forgettable films. This could have been a turning point, though. It was the perfect time for him to step back, reassess his career, and possibly even pivot. But Kirk didn't take that opportunity, and his poor choices would soon have a devastating effect on his future. By the early 1970s, Kirk's desperation was palpable, and he took a role in the low-budget horror flick Blood of Ghastly Horror. The catch? It wasn't a union film, meaning it wasn't part of the Screen Actors Guild. This mistake cost him his SAG membership and meant that producers could no longer hire him for union projects. Kirk was left scrambling for solutions. Unable to find work in most film productions, he sank into a deep depression, trapped by his own poor decisions. Kirk's struggles had already taken a dark turn, and by this point, his use had escalated into full-blown abuse. One harrowing moment almost ended his life when he came dangerously close to overdose. With no work coming his way in Hollywood, Kirk was forced to take desperate measures just to survive. By 1973, his phone had stopped ringing with film offers. Things got so bad that he had to take a job as a waiter, something unimaginable for a once rising star. While trying to stay active, he took acting classes at the prestigious Lee Strasberg Theater, but the calls for roles never came. To make ends meet, he even worked as a chauffeur, driving people who likely had no idea who he was, let alone recognize him from his days in Old Yeller. At this low point, Kirk hit rock bottom. It was in his darkest moment that he decided it was time to be honest with the world. In 1973, he came out publicly in an interview with John Marvin, a bold and dangerous move at a time when most Hollywood stars weren't open about their sexuality. For many, coming out was considered career suicide. And for Kirk, it meant a definitive goodbye to Hollywood. After his announcement, the roles completely stopped coming. But Kirk wasn't done. He moved to Kentucky and shifted his focus to musical theater, appearing in productions like Hello, Dolly, and Little Mary Sunshine. Slowly, film offers trickled in once again, but they were nothing like the family-friendly roles he was once known for. In 1988, Kirk starred in Streets of Death, a gritty, violent film. Kirk was the only professional actor in the cast, and it showed. Kirk later referred to Streets of Death as a case of good intentions. His career had flatlined, and no matter what he did, it seemed nothing could revive it. As the new millennium arrived, Kirk continued to appear in films that were quickly forgotten. If titles like Billy Frankenstein or The Education of a Vampire don't ring any bells, that's no surprise. These weren't films with widespread releases, and Kirk was scraping the bottom of the barrel just to stay afloat in the business. This kind of work would have made anyone bitter. But Kirk was different. Despite it all, in 1990, he made an announcement that stunned many. He was broke, yet he maintained a positive outlook. Instead of wallowing in regret, he opened a carpet cleaning business, naming it Tommy Kirk's Carpet Upholstery. He insisted he wasn't bitter and had no regrets, seemingly content with the quiet life ahead. And then, in 2006, something unexpected happened. Disney, who had long moved on from Kirk, seemed to have forgotten the reasons they parted ways. They made a move that would surprise everyone. They inducted Kirk as a Disney legend. At his side during this surprising moment were his co-stars Tim Considine and Kevin Corcoran, who had played his brothers on screen. You might think that being honored in this way would have been bittersweet for Kirk, but his reaction was anything but expected. Disney recalled his words when he was awarded his Disney legend status. Kirk's response shocked many. He said it was his Disney work that he wanted fans to remember. He singled out two films, Swiss Family Robinson and Old Yeller, stating that these were the roles he hoped fans would associate with him. Once again, Kirk retreated into his quiet life, only to discover that there were still people who cared. In 2017, at 76 years old, Kirk learned that his legacy hadn't faded. He was still on people's minds. Kirk stunned listeners during a radio interview when he announced that he wasn't just gay, but bi. He revealed that he had relationships with both women and men, but just 4 years later, tragedy struck. On September 28, 2021, a neighbor found Kirk's lifeless body in his Las Vegas apartment. Kirk was 79 years old when the heartbreaking news of his passing spread. His longtime friend and fellow child star Peter Peterson was the one who shared it with the world through social media. Peterson's message carried a heartfelt note to fans. Tommy Kirk loved you. But there was an even more sorrowful revelation in Peterson's post. Kirk's family had completely cut ties with him, and the reason was devastating. It seemed likely that his family's disapproval stemmed from his choice of relationships. This could explain why Kirk had such a strong bond with his on-screen families. Yet, despite the pain, Kirk did find a sense of belonging in the end. Kevin Corcoran, his on-screen brother in multiple films, remembered Kirk as a remarkable talent. He admitted to having given Kirk a hard time over the years, but Corcoran was certain that Kirk didn't harbor any resentment. It sounds like a classic brotherly dynamic. Kirk also found connection through Old Yeller. In 1994, he attended a convention where he reconnected with Beverly Washburn, his on-screen neighbor from the film. Though years had passed since they last saw each other, the reunion sparked a new friendship. It's touching that, in the end, Kirk found a family through the film that had captured his heart. And make sure to subscribe for more. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.